This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and Methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 590, Breaking Routines. For Monday, April 27th, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Hard times breed new thinking, and new pragmatic solutions are popping up all over the ad industry. From reimagining keyword strategies to revaluation of ad tech opportunities to how we generate creative. Tonight, we look at innovation during the pandemic. Also, the drive to make downtime productive, the positive reception of virtual sports drafts, the lengthening of payment terms, plus this week's fair, fail, foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal consultant at the Idea Integration Company. Mr. Saul Colt is here. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. I thought my bio would be CMO of WeWork by this week, but I never got the call. So thank you for having me back on the show.
Well, even though you're not the CMO of WeWork, we're still pleased to have you on our program every week. Now, also with us, we have the author of Built to Suck and host of Corona TV, co-founder of innovation and brand consultancy, the HMS Beagle, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Bob. Actually, I got the call regarding WeWork, which is why Saul didn't get the call. So I am now the new CMO of WeWork. Oh, wait a second. Email just came in. Looks like I lost the job again. Oh, well. Maybe Mike got it. I don't know.
Mike?
I'm looking through my email now. Oh, yep, I did. No.
And that voice you hear is someone we're always pleased to have on the program, co-founder, creative director of creative agency Campfire, Mr. Mike Monello is here. Hi, Mike.
Hello, good evening, and thanks for having me back on.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have all of you on. And this is as Joe said at the beginning, the perfect panel to deal with these topics, so I'm really excited to jump right in. We tend to focus a lot on the negatives of mass quarantine. I don't know why we would, but we do. We tend to be negative about the whole process, but there is no doubt that these trying times are sharpening the tip of the proverbial spear and causing us to reevaluate many of the things we have believed, many of the things we thought, many of the processes we've come to rely on in favor of new innovations, new thinking, and new everything. So, Joe, this topic is pretty much custom built for you. So how is the ad world getting smarter and more focused during the crisis? I'm just going to leave this wide open because there's so many areas that we can get onto, and I just want to have your thoughts right at the front.
Yeah, I mean, when you said, how is the ad world getting smart and more focused during the crisis, I was going to be like, wait, was that a trick question? I mean, look, so I guess I'll try not to be too snarky too early, although I guess I just did. I guess we could look at it from two perspectives, right? The left brain or the right brain. Let's start off with the left brain, where we're talking about everything, including data, including budgets, optimization, decisions like should we be advertising at all, recognizing that there are so many studies that indicate that companies that continue to advertise during a recession almost always realize benefits from doing so. But then there's also the automation conversation, specifically as it relates to technology. And a couple of the source articles that you shared spoke about how some companies are, and even companies that are getting funded because they're moving their focus, for example, from in-store retail programmatic advertising to supermarkets or grocery chains. So the type of companies. And then there was another one that spoke about keywords, and instead of false positives, the idea of false negatives, so that because of brand safety regulations or procedures, if you will, a lot of great content is being overlooked. So the example given could be cooking a cooking class when in quarantine, or learn how to paint when sheltering at home during the coronavirus crisis.
This was particularly interesting. This article was particularly interesting for me because it's just like this idea of false positives, of false negatives, has been floating around the industry for a while, but nobody was doing anything about it. But now, with this stark contrast of Corona being so negative and being perceived as being so negative and using it as a negative keyword, it was locking advertisers out of lots of positive content that they could have been associated with just because they had no human involved with it. And there seems to be more of a movement for human interaction in the programmatic process, which is, it's great that the people are finally coming to that realization, but you'd think they would have come up with that long before now.
Right, because the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think what's happened is in a drying up or a scarcity of viable content, what's really happened, and it's funny, but the overwhelming thought in my mind is laziness. That all marketers have always moved towards automation because of simplification and because of laziness. And now
I would caveat that, because I used to say laziness too, but I think it's more rote activity. It's more the familiar. The familiar makes us get into set ways and patterns. And when we're taken out of the familiar, we start to look at the world in a different light, and we start to look at the possibilities that are available to this new world order that we're dealing with. And
but just to kind of nuance it, and I think this is kind of the bridge between our 2 points of view. The point was that keywords were being looked at in an oversimplified fashion, almost from a sentiment standpoint.
Agreed.
Good, bad, very binary. And I think now there is more nuance and context that has to come into focus. So it's not that I'm saying marketers are lazy now. It's the fact that they realize they have to work a little bit harder because times are tougher and more challenging. And so in that case, it's a good thing, which is this move towards a different kind of automation. Maybe it's an automation, but with a bit of humanity thrown in, for good measure. And I think that's the point that I wanted to make.
No, it's a great point. I mean, it's just like they're throwing in humanity into the process. And what I was getting at about routine, when we get into routine, Mike, we kind of get into this process of going, this is how creative is generated. This is how we produce it. This is how we think about the problem. And these are the options that are available to us. And we even though creative is supposed to push the boundaries, we can get ourselves locked into a routine of process that blinds us to the opportunities that are available, that only become evident when you have to look there, when you have to look beyond what you've been given before. How is this impacting what you're doing?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I think one of the best things that's happening as a result of everyone working at home is that it's thrown everybody's kind of traditional processes out the window, and those processes are being stripped down. Meetings have become more efficient because we're doing them through, a teleconferencing platform. And overall, there have been, my experience, fewer internal stakeholders involved, and the work isn't suffering as a result. So I'm hoping that a lot of these changes are permanent. But the big thing is that the limitations of the situation are forcing all of us to really think in ways that we haven't before. Like you said, to identify those patterns. And I'm a big believer, having started as an indie filmmaker, that it's the limitations are where the creativity is to be found. It's like figuring out what you can do with the resources you have is in many ways incredibly freeing because it focuses us and it takes away a lot of the bells and whistles and forces us to get back to what really matters when we're trying to communicate with people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with this. I mean, it's just like, obviously it was my point originally, but I mean, it's just like, I love what you're saying about streamlining processes, getting back down to the core idea, and looking at new opportunities that have become available when you have lack of resources or restricted resources. Saul, I'm going to get you in on the conversation at this point because it's just like, this is what you do all the time. I mean, your whole process is to step outside the ad world and do things a little bit more, nuanced and differently than other ad agency creatives would do. And you always come up with these kind of interesting, innovative solutions for every single problem. It's just like, this must be, an incredible time for you, even if, work is good or bad. It must be really a justification of a lot of the processes that you've put in place over the years.
Well, Bob, you know me, I'm always one to pat myself on the back when a million people are dying. But beyond that, that was a joke, people. You guys can lighten up a little bit. I've always, for the last, years, sort of been anti-programmatic. One of the bigger stories before Corona in 2020 was Kobe Bryant passing away. And I don't know if you guys talked about this on the show, but it was a big story in Canada, right next to the headline of Kobe Bryant's helicopter going down was a programmatic stock photography, or it was an ad that was run that used stock photography of a helicopter for a helicopter tour company. And, when with the absence of people, the increased bit of supervised, supervision.
Saul, you're breaking up a little bit.
These accidents happen, and one of the things that
you're breaking up a little bit, so we missed a little bit of that, but you might have to restart. Well,
I think. All right, well, I'll just.
No.
Oh wait, there is.
I'll just.
Yeah, Saul.
I'll start talking again.
Okay, you're lagging a little bit behind us, so why don't you restart the program and come on back? But I want to go to Joe and talk a little bit more about one of the articles that I found, because the one about ad tech investment was really interesting to me, because a couple of weeks ago on the show, we talked a lot about how the veil, if you will, was being taken back from ad tech, and we were revealing that a lot of ad tech wasn't tech at all. It was just, media companies, media resellers at best. They weren't even really delivering any kind of technology, and it became immediately evident in the wake of all these media cutbacks. And so it's resharpened investment in real technologies and real solutions. How are you seeing the investment community, the innovation community? How is it evolving? How are the players evolving in this time of crisis?
Can I go back to the laziness comment again?
Yes, you can.
No, because I was looking at these articles, and the one spoke about this company that was moving their focus into the grocery and supermarket space, and all I could think of, and I was only half joking about laziness. It seemed very, and you would expect this from the investment community. It seemed very short term and very opportunistic. It didn't seem like this was a long-term play. And in their defense, who would be investing in the long term right now when we don't even know what the hell is going to happen next month? So I think a lot of these investment decisions are absolutely focused on where the puck is right now versus where the puck is heading. But I also wanted to, and I'm very curious as to how what Mike's point of view is. Initially, I spoke about the left brain and the right brain. And when we look at the messaging and from a creative standpoint, and I'm sure if you haven't discussed it on the show, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this brilliantly cut piece of video that says every single commercial about the coronavirus is exactly the same. And it's incredible when you actually look at this cut that they're all saying the same thing. They're all being completely predictable and formulaic. And even if, and I'll give every single advertiser the benefit of the doubt, that they unbeknownst and independently came up with the same script at the same time, when you put it together in context, it just falls flat and it loses any semblance of credibility or authenticity. And then, interestingly enough, Frito-Lay just came out with an ad that basically says, all these ads are out there right now saying, we've got your back, we're all in this together during these unprecedented times. But for us, it's all about people. And to their credit, they talk about all the great things they are doing, and they're doing a lot of great things. But my point of view is, why on earth are we talking about how great we are? Why on earth are we not just being great? So on the left and the right, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just, maybe woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but I'm feeling a little underwhelmed in terms of what our great ad industry is coming up to during these tough, unprecedented, challenging times.
So you feel more bearish on the entire industry as far as their response to coronavirus and their ability to act quick and come up with new solutions to problems? I mean, it's just like, is it the same at all levels? Do you see more innovation coming from the smaller agencies as opposed to the holding companies, or where do you see the main benefit of innovation being displayed?
I mean, the funny thing is, what I would say, and I really want to hear what Mike has to say on this too, but I think, you talk about first mover advantage. I think the company that came out, in fact, Budweiser came out very early in the process with one of their anthem, "We're all in this together" spots. And so on the front end, I actually, I think first mover advantage counted. Now on the back end, I almost feel like we're coming full circle. And what we need now are more Burger Kings turning their logo into Tiger Kings. We actually need a little bit of frivolous, superficial, almost, just banal, that just takes us away from all of this heaviness and intensity. I guess the point is, the definition of creativity, or one of the definitions, is the word productive originality. And in other words, doing things differently to get a result, which of course flies in the face of Einstein's definition of insanity. I want to see more originality. That's what I want to see. And I want to see originality that isn't just grounded in the opportunistic here and now, but more in terms of a bigger vision and a bigger strategy.
As do we all. And I think that's... Go ahead, Mike. You had something you were going to say?
I was going to say I agree on both points. On the first is there's nothing more aggravating than watching the news and seeing an ad from a company spending millions of dollars in media to put a commercial on the TV to tell me how they're donating $100,000 to some charity. There's nothing more aggravating than that. And I think people see right through that. And I do believe that brands, if you're going to go that route, then I think you have to do something that's so remarkable you get that coverage for free. And if you're not doing that, then get out of the way. As far as creativity, I fully agree. And what I've been most thrilled with this last month is that for us, our briefs are coming in, and our clients are much more open to experimentation, to exploring things that previously they wouldn't have because their usual channels are locked up or no longer effective or not appropriate. And I hope that stays, because it's an enormous opportunity. There are so many things, and I know we'll talk later, but there are so many things that the ad industry has embraced and then kind of tossed away as old that I think should actually be brought back again. I would love to see that explosion of creativity and digital come back, even if it's frivolous. We're all online now, working from home. We all need something every once in a while to take our mind off this. And I think there's enormous opportunity there for the brands that are willing to take a chance.
Saul, I think we have you back. I wanted to drag you back into here. What were you saying before we got cut off? I wanted to make sure we get a chance to come back to that.
Well, it's probably been said already because I missed everything you guys talked about. But I'm a big, I've been sort of anti-programmatic for a long time. I think when you don't have the human oversight and the human intervention of a lot of things, really bad, decisions sort of happened. When Kobe Bryant passed away in a helicopter, there was obviously it was big news in Canada. It's Kobe Bryant and a legendary figure, but even bigger news that 2 days later, the story around Kobe Bryant was the fact that our national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, on their online reporting of Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash, there was three ads in a row, all for helicopter tours, and they had these really weird, stock photography images of helicopters and happy people in helicopters and this and that, and that's flat, just programmatic error and things like that. Um, I'm going to even go further and say, and if you guys covered this already, I'm sorry, but I think, what we're really seeing also in the ad industry or just, work in general is with everybody at home and everybody working from home, you can't hide your skill set any longer. So all the real stars are now going to shine, and the real great thinkers are going to bubble to the top where maybe they wouldn't have had, an opportunity anymore. I saw it was Ad Week, WEEK or EAK,
Oh yeah,
the parody site that said, creative directors all around the world are mourning the fact that they can't sexually harass their employees in person anymore. It's a bad joke or however you want to call it, but the fact that we're not distracted by commutes and lunch hours and socializing anymore, we should be getting the best work we've ever seen from people. And maybe the right people aren't in those roles anymore, and some great companies will notice it and make changes. But man, this should be like the second coming of the creative revolution right now. We talked last week of a Honda commercial that was done with a toy car in their home. That's the greatest thing I've seen in the last month. I'd love to celebrate real amazing creativity because like Mike said, and I agree wholeheartedly. You take away resources, you take away everything. This is when real creatives, like most creatives want to work with limited budget but total freedom and stuff like that. I think we're going to see some of the best work. But to echo what Joe said as well, man, brands have to really stop with their American flag and their scrubs and their buy a Toyota, because I think we're all kind of past that right now. By no means are we by no means are we giving up on rooting for frontline workers, but I don't remember who said it just as I was rejoining, but give them money. Don't patronize them with these awful ads that cost way more than your donation and stuff like that. There's been so many brands historically that have just done amazing things in the background, and it always gets out. And maybe it's leaked, and that's fine. Nobody cares because you did that awesome thing to get the news around that. But earn your news. Let's get back to that paid, owned, and earned. Let's actually earn our stuff right now. And I don't think any brands are earning, or not many brands are earning their press right now the way they should, because man, I think we're at the point now where journalists are looking for anything but a Corona story right now.
And you know what, I agree, and I just want to build on that. There is one campaign, I don't even know if well, I would say two things. One, I think the challenge, Saul, is that people don't have anything to talk about. When you talk about this creative renaissance or the second coming, couldn't agree with you more. The problem, of course, is there's nothing to talk about, and if you've got nothing constructive or positive or valuable to say, shut the hell up. And that's kind of the advice to brands, which is you don't have anything to talk about. But there is one exception, and I have to call out Dove's Courage is Beautiful. And again, I don't even want to call it a campaign because that would insult the work that Dove has done. Dove created this entire platform and a commitment and followed through on that commitment with their whole campaign for real beauty. And I think the work that they've done showing these first responders with, dirt on their faces and indentations and essentially scabs and blood drawn from these PPE masks on their faces. And it is just the truth. And it connects. If you don't connect with that, you don't have a heart. And my point is, that is courage. That's what we need right now. We need courage from advertisers to be different, to be daring, and to be honest.
Well,
I would say that advertisers always have courage. I'd say we need courage from brands, because there's a huge kind of sword over people's head where they're all afraid to be fired, and nobody's really willing to take great risks. Or I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people aren't willing to take great risks right now, at least from the conversations I've been having. So I think advertisers are always willing to advertising and creative people are always willing to take great chances and do cool things. It's have to sort of get in line and stuff. But one thing I would say about the Dove campaign, man, that was placed right at the perfect time with a great message, which is what great creatives should be doing. But I don't think that ad works today or in a week from now. So I think they were smart enough to kind of know when it expired and let it kind of go. I haven't seen it in the last few weeks, so I'm assuming they let it go. Maybe I'm just not being targeted with it, but I'm not sure. Like, I think they were the first ones out of the gate with what I consider proper, great, targeted messaging to their brand, to the situation, to the environment. But like, I think every day the normal or the new normal, which I hate that expression, but every day what's acceptable shifts a little bit. And I really think people now are fatigued by some of those kind of messaging. So, like, that's why I'm a big proponent. I've been sort of shouting as loud as, I can for anyone who will listen. And this sort of goes back to what you were talking about the Tiger King and stuff like that. Like, we had the frontline workers, and now we just need to support them and finance them and let them know their thing. We shouldn't be using them as advertising pawns anymore, because I think that we're past that, and we have to never forget these people and never let them down, but don't tie them to brands anymore, because I think we're all kind of like, I don't agree with this. I think everyone should be locked in their house until this is all done. But there's 2 states in the U.S. that have really let
Okay, Saul just disappeared.
Shelter at home restrictions.
Saul, you're doing fine. You had a good long run there, but it just died on you right there at the end. But I get your point. It's just like, do you have anything more you wanted to say about this?
No, I think that we have to stop using frontline workers as a pawn, because I think for some part of the population, they think we're at the home stretch right now, and they want to get outside as fast as they can. So I think brands have to be sensitive to it, not pretend that none of this didn't happen, but start adding a little bit more humanity and humor in what they're doing, because like, they have to be thinking 4 months out and not 4 days.
Yeah, you make a lot of great points, and that was clear. You are lagging a little bit behind us, about 5 or so seconds. I'm not sure if there's anything you can do on that your end, but we do have to move on to our next topic. I want to talk next about Masterclass, not Masterclass in particular, but what Masterclass represents with their advertising. They are really crushing it right now, getting a lot of new accounts because people really want to make the most of their quarantine. What we're going to talk about is what that means to advertisers going forward. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, it's time to talk about our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, and give you a chance to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for doing a demo with them. Now, you listen to the show. You know that we're talking a lot about the coronavirus. We're talking about how it's affecting people, how it's affecting the marketing world and the advertising industry, affecting the people who work in it and the people we advertise to. And you all, of course, know several weeks back about that McDonald's ad in Brazil that separated the arches to symbolize social distancing. People got really ticked about it. They hated the ad. And I can't really say that that was a terrible idea. I have no idea whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. The only thing that I know is that a lot of people got upset about it. And when you get people upset, you're going to cause a big problem for you down the line. Decisions are being made under stressful situations right now. And I got sympathy. I have sympathy for this agency that put this ad out, but it's a problem that might have been avoided by faster research. And this is where our sponsor, Methodify by Divinia, can help. Now, Methodify will collect real-time feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it to the world. And the whole process will take you hours. I said it, hours, not days. Now, Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions that will protect their brand and themselves in this new world we're facing. Now, just a few weekends ago, Methodify was used to test digital creative for another fast food chain to make sure that the messaging wasn't tone deaf. Now, it was valuable information for them, and Methodify can do the same for you. Actual customer feedback is a game changer because in times like what we're facing right now, brands that wait and see are going to wind up making costly mistakes down the line. Now, of course, we want you to connect with your customers. We want you to build relationships. We want you to build trust. We want you to build fans. But we want you to test everything. It's the safest way to go forward right now. And Methodify can get you started today. Now, to find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. That's methodify.it, Methodify it /BeanCast. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. And believe me, I've got plenty of time. If I've got plenty of time, you've got plenty of time. So again, that address is methodify.it /BeanCast, and we thank them very much for their support of our program. Now, we've all heard the bravado that if you don't come out of the quarantine having learned a language or written a book or picked up a skill, you'll have wasted your time in this, which is probably why Masterclass is selling subscriptions hand over fist. But I want to take a deeper look at the motivations, Mike. This is a piece of information I think we can do something with. And I want to ask the question, does this reveal anything important that advertisers can use during or after the pandemic? What is your take on this statistic or this fact that Masterclass is doing so much business and people are so focused on learning new activities?
Yeah, I think this is
Mike, did I lose you? Mike?
Hello?
This is not my day for technology.
Please be patient. We have a problem.
I think for Skype is not long for the world.
Oh, boy.
Go ahead.
It's been that kind of year.
Okay. So I do think this is a fascinating bit of information. But before, and I know this wasn't you saying that, but I absolutely hate that bravado. I've seen it coming from several people, and there's so much privilege behind it. Yes. I really, really hate that when people say, "Oh, well, if you're not learning something new, then you're not doing it right." Oh, but the masterclass phenomenon to me is really about people reevaluating their lives, their careers, and their desires in light of this really traumatic event that we're all suffering, right? I mean, this pandemic is the kind of thing that makes us reconsider what's really important and what really matters to us. And I think there's going to be a lot of people making major life changes, personal and professional, and this goes way beyond just marketing and advertising. It goes to ethics, our morality, our sense of purpose in the world. And I think this goes to something we had talked about in the previous one, that the brands and companies that are going to get through this by the way they act and the way they treat their employees and customers rather than what they say in communications are going to come out the other side just fine. And the brands that are spending millions telling us they donated a paltry sum of money to charity, not so much, because I think everybody is reevaluating what they want. We were talking about great creative in the previous topic and how we should be having great creative, and I think we are. Like creatively, I feel very inspired by the work that I'm doing right now, and I'm also home every day for dinner. That's going to radically change how I feel when we go back to the office. And I think about how many nights I miss dinner with the family to get the work done. And I think that's just one example. I think we're going to see that across the board as people reevaluate everything. And masterclass is an aspect of that. I think it's the first bit of testing and trying something new.
Well, obviously, that's going to change the way that we do work and how we manage our own lives, but it also affects how we talk to consumers out there in the marketplace, right? I mean, when we're dealing with an entire population that's reevaluating their ethics and morals and careers and lifestyles and all these different factors going up in the air, that's both a boon and a curse for advertisers and brands. Saul, you were jumping in. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I kind of roll my eyes when people are high-fiving Masterclass and Peloton, because these companies were literally designed for this situation before they knew this situation was coming. Like, they haven't changed a stitch of their messaging. They haven't changed a stitch of their marketing plan, except for maybe just doubling down on remnant ads and clogging up like the bandwidth with all their stuff. But like, you think of all the companies that were caught flat-footed by all this, and all of a sudden they're throwing big money at people promising digital transformation because they'd never thought of it before. But like, I think Masterclass is cool. I've never taken a course. I've been curious about them for years, and probably, yes, now I would be more curious, because the only barrier to their product has always been time, and time is something that people have more of right now. But to be calling them geniuses and all this stuff and to learn from them, they haven't changed anything, because like, you could almost make a case that they might be behind the coronavirus. Yes, it's a joke. Everyone calm down. But this is like, there's half a dozen brands that are, this is the best thing that's ever happened to their company. I'm not saying that, Masterclass is wishing this upon everyone. Obviously, nobody wishes this upon anybody. You got to be careful, because people just don't understand, nuance anymore. But man, these guys have not changed a single thing to account for the situation. So we shouldn't be sitting around calling them geniuses, except for maybe the fact that they get all these celebrities to work on a rev share.
Well, I don't think anybody's calling them genius, but at least not on this panel. But we haven't heard from Joe yet. Joe might actually call them a genius. I don't know. But I'm more of the thought that it's just like what they've uncovered is something that we're going to need to deal with as a whole in the marketing community going forward, as we start to look at how to market our products and our services to a consumer base that is completely different now.
Yeah, so I want to go back one step, and I think what Mike said is on the money, which is that this isn't just about, oh, you wasted your time in quarantine, you lazy SOB, you didn't learn this is about people reevaluating their priorities. One of the things that I did, I went back and I've recorded a whole bunch of vignettes based on my book, Flip the Funnel. And the last chapter in the book is called Flip the Funnel in Your Personal Life. And I talk about how instead of flipping the funnel or turning the funnel into a megaphone, which is what Seth Godin said, I said, what if you use it as a spyglass, as a telescope, to gain perspective? And one of the things that I said, first of all, looking back on 10 years, it's quite an introspection when you do that. And I said, well, if you were miserable, and I was specifically talking about the coronavirus, I said, if you were miserable in your job before, why on earth would you want to be miserable again? Now is the time to take charge and change things. And so that was the first point. The second point, I think, is it's less about whether Masterclass or Peloton deserve credit, but where I do think they deserve credit is it's kind of what Saul was saying. They weren't planning for this, but they've built a business on an insight and recognized a trend and how the world was changing. And whilst I don't think Peloton or Masterclass in their wildest dreams or worst nightmares would have envisioned this, the fact is all it's done is just accelerated their roadmap and their kind of their journey. That's the second point. The third point to your question is very simple answer here, which is advertisers are going to have to recognize and how people are changing their priorities and their outlook in life. And they're either going to have to go completely, farting donkey a la Budweiser in the Super Bowl. They're going to have to go almost off the wall, crazy slapstick, kind of like don't even think twice and just be essentially brain dead when it comes to these kinds of jokes. Or they're going to have to not be intense and so serious, we're all in this together, but they're going to have to talk to substance. Substance will trump, all the sizzle and the sex that has always been part of our business.
Good point, Saul. Go ahead,
I think that's
Mike.
absolutely correct. I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I don't think people are going to be in quite such consumerist mood when we come out of this.
Do you really think that people are going to be less of a consumer, that a person's going to be less of a consumer coming out of this?
No, I think that so many of us are creatures of habit, and all our habits are being broken right now. They're all being broken, and
right.
So when we get and for a long time, right? Like if on a basic level, if you were someone who got up, took a shower, left your house and stopped and got a breakfast somewhere before, you might not do that anymore. I mean, that habit is gone, and we're going to create new habits, and we're going to create new patterns for ourselves as we come out. And it's not going to immediately flip back to the other way, because it's going to be a slow return. And I just think for many of us, especially because our savings are being depleted, if we're lucky to still have jobs, our salaries might still be diminished in some way, or we just weren't making money during this time. We're going to be a lot more careful about where we spend that money and how we spend it. And the reality is the things that we were buying before that we didn't need, we've realized now that we don't need them because we're without them now.
Can I just give a small personal anecdote? My wife would go to Starbucks once and sometimes twice a day, and she would order a grande. This is a drink, if I can remember correctly, a grande extra hot skim, no whip mocha with a little bit of light foam on top, because I had to always remember her drink sometimes. And it's about $4.50, $5. And she would, if you do the math, she was going once, sometimes twice a day. After our quarantine ended, and she was able to go out to do the groceries, etc. And by the way, there is a line for the Starbucks drive-through that almost goes around the block. But I mean, that's just because people can't go inside. She's taken it, she's decided not to go back to Starbucks. And I said, go back, treat yourself, get your mocha. She goes, I don't want to anymore. I don't need to anymore. It's not part of my routine anymore. Now, that's evidence, a small little anecdote to what Mike's saying. The funny thing is, what she is doing every day is having an espresso. So you see sometimes how one company might dip or dive, and the other one might be in the ascendancy just based on changing tastes and changing times. But I would agree. I don't think people are going to, the pent up demand that Trump spoke about, it's just not going to be there. It's just not.
Yeah, good points. Well, I got to move on to our next topic because we're running a little bit low on time. There were two bright, shining moments for sports advertisers over the last month. First, the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, and then this past week, the NFL held their annual drafts virtually, not in person, but virtually, to huge audiences and reinvigorated advertising sales numbers. So, Saul, what does this teach us about the health of sports fandom and about the latent opportunities for sports programming during this time?
So, it shows kind of what everyone has always thought about sports. There's nothing like sports. We're drawn, as people, we're drawn by the competition. We're drawn by the history. Sports is, there's so much of sports that there's that old cliche. This is why they play the games. Anything could happen at any time, and there's a real absence from it. I'm going to disagree with you and say that the two biggest things in sports right now, like yes, the NFL draft was huge for advertisers, but the biggest thing right now is the Michael Jordan documentary that people are literally falling all over themselves for. And ESPN did some really clever advertising through there where they created kind of like deep fake ads running, during the broadcast, where they basically created ads that looked like they were taking place in 1993, similar to the timeline of the documentary. So there, that was something that was really interesting. But with all this said, and I can keep waxing on about sports and this and that. The NFL draft was a really big deal for brands because brands are looking for any opportunity. The things that are really going crazy right now are the streaming services, which you can't advertise on. A lot of broadcast television has probably been locked up ahead of time, so they can't jump on this. These were things that they know the audience. The target audience, they know the size of the audience is reasonably predictable. This is something that they know is going to be kind of like the Oscars of the COVID era, appointment television, if there was such a thing for a certain audience. So of course brands would get excited and jump all over this. There's not that many tentpole events that we can actually point to on the calendar right now because everything's being canceled. The big winner of this was Lowe's. Lowe's was able to own the NFL draft because Marriott pulled out their national sponsorship of the NFL because their business is really suffering through everything COVID related. So I don't know. I'm just rambling. I don't know if I've had a clear point, but of course this was predictable. This is a big thing because it's really the only thing that anyone can look forward to that speaks to their love of sports, their love of community, their love of everything that's kind of missing. And if there's one gleaming light in the future that the world may get back to, a little bit of normalcy, it's sports.
Well, I mean, for me, when I heard this, one of the key factors about the NFL draft that was covered over and over again was that it was so personal this year, and it was so, in a lot of ways, more magical than in previous years. And for me, that said, there's this great latent opportunity for sports networks to start looking at their programming not as just covering sports, but on the human interest side of the business and really start ramping things up. And you bring up the Michael Jordan documentary. That's a perfect example. I mean, when we're dying for sports and advertisers are dying to get back into advertising on sporting programming, this seems like a slam dunk. I mean, Mike, you're an expert in fandom. I mean, this is your whole shtick is dealing with fans and motivating fans into action. Am I wrong about this?
No, you're absolutely right. Look, I don't know anything about sports. I don't watch it. I don't follow it, but I do understand fandom. And the reality is that just because sports and concerts and theaters and cinemas are shut down, it doesn't mean the hunger for these things is going away. It really doesn't. And the thing that unites all fandoms, whether it's sports or opera, is this kind of desire to be close to the thing you love and to be around others who love that thing as well. And so the draft was an opportunity for sports fans to really just come together in that way. And I think the intimacy you're talking about is that thirst for getting closer to the players. If we can't do it through the games, they're going to do it through anything else. And I see that across every fandom, right? The music industry is going to virtual concerts. We're seeing the comedy club around the corner from me is hosting virtual Zoom sessions with comics that are a little different. We're seeing like this last Friday, I participated in a live event, watch along with the Blair Witch Project for the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. And there were hundreds of people, and we were watching the film, and, Ed and Greg and I were answering questions about the making of it and the marketing of it and so on and so forth while the film was going on. And then afterwards, we did this kind of virtual Q&A after. And it was a blast. And the only thing that I was surprised by is the fact that the Museum of Pop Culture is doing this weekly, and there's no brands there that are supporting it. but fans still want to engage, and they will engage if given the opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity for brands right now. I mean, we think that the idea of events has gone away, but it hasn't. It's just adapting.
And it really just takes creativity. It goes right back to that first topic,
Yep.
being innovative about the way we're thinking about the problem and not just getting caught into our rote ways because we don't have the event, we don't have events to cover, and that's just not the truth. You were going to say something there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that one thing that's so interesting during this quarantine period has been these watch parties on Facebook. And I actually kind of I kind of picked up on randomly. I ended up one of my Facebook friends that I'd never really met before. One of my friends, my in quotes, is a DJ, and he started just mixing one evening in his garage, and I ended up just watching and commenting for about 10 or 15 minutes, and we've actually really started connecting now post fact. But I've been aware of all these watch parties of watching a television program together and all of these DJs and then watch parties, associated. And it's exactly that, right? We want the shared experiences, and we want to be able to experience these things together. And it's an ironic return to the water cooler, but it's a very different type of experience. And so it may not and doesn't have to necessarily be a massive sporting event, which of course is not happening right now, or a draft, which is kind of the story behind the story. It could also be something happening at a pretty micro level, but it creates that moment of multiple people experiencing the same thing together at the same time, and that's very powerful.
Yeah, and we've known that for years, so it's just like it's surprising that we're just kind of starting to figure that out now. I got one last topic. It's in a lot of ways, it's more just reporting the news than commentary, but I'd love to get a quick roundup of opinion about this. Apparently, a lot of brands are lengthening their payment terms. Now, this is not surprising given the current circumstances and everybody being affected by the pandemic, but agencies and ad tech companies and media companies, especially media publishers, are really feeling the squeeze from this. Is there any way to combat the lengthening payment terms it's already out of control with some brands going as long as 4 to 6 months for payment. If you're going to lengthen it beyond that, it's just outrageous. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It is outrageous, and I love the story of that publisher who decided on certain clients whether we're pushing for onerous terms and just turn off the campaign. Just turn it off. I mean, I think we're at a point where we as agencies and media companies, we have to just kind of say no. And that's really, really tough. But the truth is that advertising and marketing is an ecosystem. It's not every company for itself. And so the more that one aspect of the ecosystem breaks down or gets crushed by another, the worse it is for everyone across the board. So, I've been preaching this for a long time. And at Campfire, if somebody comes to the table with onerous terms, we just say no. But I think that's because we've been lucky enough to stay small enough and focused to be able to do that. But I just can't imagine wanting to partner with someone who would think so little of us as a partner that they would want to squeeze us that way.
Yeah, great point. And that's how I'm going to wrap it up. It's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the home of the Idea Integration Company. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote? You're on mute, Saul, if you didn't know.
There we go. I'd like to talk to anybody out there who is looking for help getting through, COVID. We're doing a bunch of calls around messaging, doing a bunch of calls around content creation. We have time, a little bit more time than we're comfortable with. So please reach out, theideaintegration.com. And if you want to just set up a 15-minute free consulting call, I've done about 170 of these, trying to be as helpful as possible without hurting people's pocketbook, you can go to calendly.com/coffee with Saul. Grab some time, and I'm looking to help anybody who wants help.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Next up, we have Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at thehmsbeagle.com. That's the home of his consultancy that he co-founded with Lynn Power. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
Lynn and I have been pretty busy. We're doing something similar to what Saul's doing. We're offering what we call survival boosts. And it's actually been it's been great just for my own sanity and for Lynn's as well. But what we do is we're taking on one client a week, and it's a very simple process. It's a 1-hour briefing, about 3 or 4 hours of work in the background, and then a 1-hour presentation of their survival boost. And it's all done within 1 week. And then part of the deal is that we can share the entire case study publicly. So it's a bit of a pay it forward as well. Like, we're not going to give free consulting to a company and then have them keep the insights to themselves. So they have to also agree to share. They can approve it, but share some of the insights. And we're finishing our second one tomorrow. We're doing our next one as well. And if you actually follow me or are connected to me on LinkedIn, or subscribe to my newsletter, you'll see that I published the entire case study through both my newsletter, which you can subscribe to on josephjaffe.com, or otherwise through LinkedIn. And then the other thing is I'm having a blast with Corona TV, coronatv.show. I've got, every day I've got an interview. I'm booked up through the first week in June. And I have some very, very prestigious guests coming on the show, but no more so than Mr. Bob Norp, who's going to be on my show soon, proving that both of us do not have a face for radio. So if you want to see him in all his good-looking glory, just come and hang out with me every day, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Corona TV.
Yeah, I do my own hair every single day. I'm cutting it on my own, so it should look really interesting for you on Thursday. And finally, Mike Monello. You can find him at campfirenyc.com. That's the home of Campfire, his agency that he's been working at for so many years, doing phenomenal work. Tell us, Mike, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Well, we have been very busy. We're a project-based agency, and our specialty really is fandom and earned media. So I would say if you're looking for something a little different, try out a different agency, go to Campfire NYC and reach out to us. We'd love to work with you.
That sounds great. And I recommend all three of these gentlemen very highly. They're some of the best people you can work with in the business. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me about getting your podcast off the ground, and even how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair. Last week we talked about Burger King with their math problems. They were made the code for the free Whopper for students, the answer to a difficult educational problem. I thought that was brilliant. This week, they did something even weirder, but a lot more fun and more open to a lot more people. They basically used a QR code on their TV commercial, but sent it spinning around the entire TV, and they dared you to catch it. And if you could catch it with your phone during the call, you could get a free Whopper. It'd take you right to the app and be able to order a free Whopper. I thought this was fairly brilliant, Saul. I mean, it's just like, it's really an interesting use of a technology that is really not all that popular in the United States, but made it pretty useful.
So 3 quick points. One, we seem to talk about Burger King a lot on the show, which makes me wonder if they're maybe underwriting the show. 2, I'm old enough to remember when QR codes weren't cool, so it's interesting to see them get kind of a second life, pun intended. And 3, and this is really the point I'm trying to make, I kind of find it fascinating that Burger King really makes people jump through a lot of hoops to get free stuff. So they've almost figured out that they're going to get press from this stuff, but they don't really want to give away that much. So they almost make it, unattainable to a certain part of the population. So those are my 3 quick points.
Good points.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that we're starting to see a more embrace of QR codes. I mean, I think it's interesting that our industry abandoned them once they actually became viable.
Yeah, that's the weird thing,
right?
Because it's just like I even when I'm in class with a bunch of Chinese nationals, when I'm teaching at NYU, I teach a lot of Chinese students. They use QR codes all the time, but even they didn't know that your iPhone, when you hold it up to a QR code with the camera on, automatically links to a link. It's like there's no app necessary anymore. All you have to do is use your camera and you can get a QR code. And yet nobody knows this and nobody's using it. It's such a great technology at this point, and it's so much more accessible to the average user. Hopefully stuff like this will change people's opinions about it. All right, the fail of the week. Influencer lifestyle influencer lifestyle shots are starting to rub people the wrong way. For instance, when influencer Jack Morris posted, "Lauren and I are trying to stay inside our villa as much as possible and comply with social distancing," and attached it to a picture of them standing at on the edge of an affinity pool in Bali, his 2.7 million followers got pretty upset over it, considering that they're not having nearly as good a quarantine experience. Joe, influencers are fun targets, but what do you recommend for an influencer to do during this time of crisis?
Let's see if I can get this acronym right. STFU.
Good point. Good point. And finally, the foul of the week. Cleaning products companies being forced to issue warnings not to ingest or inject their products because Fat Donnie made some idiotic comments on national television. Mike, so much has been said about the president making these comments about how do we get UV light inside the body? Why not try injecting or swallowing Clorox? I mean, so much has been made of it. They're idiotic, but the resulting need for all these brands to waste precious time doing advertising and PR to make sure that people know you shouldn't ingest our products seems like such a complete waste of time and terrible not to boot because it's just some stupid comment.
Oh, completely. And it's laying bare the horrifying notion that we live in a world where Lysol, Clorox, and Steak-Ums are providing more grounded leadership than the president. I mean, that's possibly the most terrifying thing that's been revealed of all.
Well, at least let's shut him up. He's been told to not be part of these programs anymore, so we'll see. Well, have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
Cool beans.